make sure we have a record of this for posterity. All right. Welcome back to 736. I appreciate you being with me today. I hope that you've had a productive couple of weeks working on your case study 28, Yellow Cab Company, as I call it. Let's do a quick update of where we are. This is the end of week 4. Dr. Hamilton and I have been looking at your perusals. We actually sat down together on Thursday. We're pleased with the progress that you're making on your discussion boards in terms of reading those. Dr. Hamilton has to remind me all the time that that's your place, not mine, for you folks to share and work back and forth. We just monitor it. And I'm a little more hands-on, and so he's had to remind me not to be. So, but I'm enjoying reading your post. I do go in pretty much daily and read those, and he and I are trying to look at the efficacy of this thing and see if it's worth the time that you're spending on it, or what. I think so far we're pleased with perusal. So thank you for participating in that. This week you had your Pritsonis article, Blue Ocean Strategy, Reinventing Your Business Model, and you were working on your case study. So that's where we are. Next week you'll be at home. There are your readings, and then we'll be back together in 2 weeks and do case study 12. So that's where we are. That's an update on where we are so far this semester. We're making good progress. All right, I'll get out of that one. The Yellow Auto Company was our case study for today. Please remember, at the end of the day, you will upload your PowerPoint in the assignment Dropbox, and you will write a up to 1-page reflection after our session this morning on what you've learned, what you should have learned, what you didn't learn, what we could have done better, the feedback from today's session. So there's your assignment Dropbox. Anybody have any questions about the responsibilities as in terms of assignment Dropbox? All right, if not, let me always check these as we go here. Okay, good. All right. Who's going to be first on the list this morning? Which team's going to go first on the change story of Yellow Auto Company?
We can go first.
All right. Who's going to be the host?
Jackie's going to be the host.
Jackie's going to be the host. All right. Let me go up. All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to my control panel to manage participants. I'm going to go to Jackie and hit more, and I'm going to make Jackie the host. Yes, I'm going to change my host to her. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop my video for a minute because that makes it easier for Jackie to pick up.
Can I go ahead and share?
Yes, please do.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time finding it.
There you go.
Thank you.
This takes a second usually.
Yeah, please forgive me. I had it already pulled up. Now I can't.
It's up here. Just click on the tab up at the top.
Gotcha.
And there we go. It's coming. There it is. Great. All right. All right. We're ready to go now.
All right. I'll put it on present mode. All right. So I'll let Tracy begin.
I need to make mine a little smaller on my end. Now, Jackie, just a question. What I need to, when I finish this, do I need to control the slide?
No, as you go and you do your part, I'll go ahead and change.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right. So good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
We are presenting to you this morning, again, I can't see it. Let me see. It's too far over. Just bear with me just for a moment. Fit the window. I can't see it, so I'm just gonna go by what I have here. All right, so me, Jackie, myself, and Tia are presenting to you the change story of the Yellow Auto Cab Company. So this is of course, the case study that I want to tell you about. Start out by telling you about the background. Yellow Auto is a car dealership, and it was well known for the brand. Guys, you're gonna have to forgive me just for a moment. I can't see the screen, so I am doing something technically wrong. So can somebody help me out? I can't see my right side. So what do I need to do?
Can you just pull up the presentation on your own computer and then just look back and forth? You know what I mean? Do you have the presentation where you can look at it without looking at this screen?
Not without wasting time. So I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go by my phone. If it's easier for me instead of wasting time to go by my phone, if that's okay.
Okay.
So to give some background again on the Yellow Auto is a dealership that was well known for the global brand Renault. And it was established in the year of 1989 by Mr. Dennis Sell in Bergama, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It is a city out in inside of Turkey, and they offered 3 types of service: automobile service, spare part sales, and after-sale repair services. Mr. Dennis' sons, Ken and Kaner, later took over the company. They took over the management. Now, Kane was a mechanical engineer. He went to school for a mechanical engineer. And Kaner had a degree in geological engineering. Although they went to school for engineering, they did have a lot of time spent at the business with their dad. So when they took over the company, they felt as they were ready and able to take over the auto dealership. Later on came Ashley, who was the sister, and she also went to school for engineering, but she was in food engineering. As Mr. Dennis's sons took over the management, they moved the company to a small town in Izmir in 1998, which is the 3rd largest company in Turkey, where there was a bigger demand for automobiles. And to meet the growing demands, the brothers ended up employing about 52 people, to meet the needs of the company. Key players in the company, again, is Kaner. His key role was the general manager. Ken's role was the top management and consultant. And Ashley, that's okay. Ashley came on as a sales director. As we discussed and we looked at the big picture within the automobile with the auto dealership, we found that there was organizational design. The organizational design was dysfunctional, and they were working within the departments. There were deficiencies in coordination and control of employment activities or employee activities. And then we also felt like the secondary problem was qualified. They did not have any qualified personnel. There's a lack of qualified personnel and effective communication between the divisions within the company.
Okay, and some alternative solutions we've established. And I don't know why my video's not working. My light is on, but I'll continue. Our alternative solutions are to establish a formal organizational structure is one, and also establishing a board of directors to help with the decision-making processes for the organization. And then also we want to enhance and encourage. So we want to enhance the employees' knowledge base through training and also the hiring process. And in doing so, getting the right people on the right seat on the bus and with the right training so that they'll know what they're doing, their expectations, and be able to carry it out. And then we also want to encourage feedback without fear of negative consequences by providing team building exercises and even social retreats along with our board of directors. So to recap, for our alternative solutions, we want to establish, enhance, and encourage. So we're establishing the formal organizational structure, establishing that board of directors, and also enhancing the knowledge base of our employees and encouraging the feedback. Our preferred solution is to establish the qualified upper management, and I would say reestablish, but we really do need to establish the qualified upper management and putting in a transparent structure to include a vision and a mission so that it's shared with everyone in the organization. Now, the risk to the preferred solution, we run the risk of having to replace upper management, which also happens to be the family. So that portion of it is one that we know may be complicated, but is one worth the discussion, especially when we're talking about the board of directors and figuring out what we need to do with upper management and utilizing the other staff that's within the organization to have that shared leadership.
Okay, so this is kind of a recap of some of the things that we witnessed throughout the organization through the case study. And as I tell you one of the 5 things that we identified, I'm just going to give you a small example of what we saw in the case study to back up what we're saying. The first thing is confusion and lack of common direction. And one of the things that they talked about in the case study is that there were a lot of unwritten rules that only Kane really had in his head. No one really knew what he was thinking. The managers felt as if they did not have any type of authority to make any decisions. They always felt like they had to call him. And one of the employees even stated that he never takes this is not verbatim, but they said that he does not take in consideration any of their opinions. He just wants done what he says. Another thing is financial challenges. And we saw that in the after sales department and the spare parts department, where there was not really a consistent type of inventory. And so sometimes they would order parts that were already there, and sometimes they thought parts were there that really weren't there, which extended, if someone was coming there to get their car fixed, it extended their stay, which means that you have disgruntled customers. And of course, once you start that, the word gets out. Also, there was a lack of collaboration that was between the sales department and the in-store sales team. It was like they were battling against each other. This also goes along not only lack of collaboration, but internal conflict and low morale within this small group of people, where one of the sales groups, they would go outside of the actual building. And some of the other folks thought that they did not have, they weren't really working. They were just going to and fro. And so that goes back to the lack of checks and balances, because the sales team that would go out off of the original campus, they never had a set schedule. They just kind of did what they wanted to do. So the conclusion that we came to comes from something that Dr. Edward Shine, I hope I'm saying that right. He said, if leaders don't manage the culture would manage them. So basically that's what's happening at this point. So we wanted to do something with the upper management. We know that a SWOT analysis had already been done with the employees. So we brought in the Denison Organizational Cultural Survey, which is also known as DOCS. I'll refer to it as that from here on out because that's a mouthful. But what we talked about were external and internal focuses, and we'll focus more on that when the survey comes back. But they talked about adaptability and involvement. With adaptability and involvement, well, first of all, let me tell you the reason of a Denison organizational survey. The purpose of the survey is to show the link between an organizational culture and the business performance. The business performance, of course, can be top-notch or not so top-notch, which means you'll go out of business. So with the two left sides of adaptability and involvement, adaptability, when the upper management takes this survey, are we listening to the marketplace? Are you listening to the outside marketplace? Get your mission to see what you need to do to be sustained. And also for involvement, are people aligned and are they engaged? And this is when you have a high score of these two things, you have a higher level of product and service, and you have a fast rate of adaptability. Two examples. One of the examples was in the book about Apple and how they were able to adapt and they were able to run with it, and now they're $1 million or $1 billion company. One of the things we talked about that a company that was not able to adapt was like Blockbuster. In the 90s, Blockbuster was booming, but when they were not able to adapt to what was going on, they went out of business. So on the other side of the scale, and I should have said this, you have 4 scales to go by, 4 key traits, and I just told you about 2 of them, adaptability and involvement. The other 2, mission and consistency, and that's where you find a healthy stability. If you don't have a mission, if you don't know where you're going, you don't have a roadmap to get there. And are you consistent in your dealings? Are you focused, and can they be predictable over time? So this is what we want to do with the upper management. And in the book, they talked about one of the companies, I can't remember what company it was, but they talked about how when this information was brought back to the upper management, they just couldn't believe it, because they said the best part when you do this survey, you want a colorful survey, and it goes around. And I know I only told you about the 4, but there are also 12 other related management practices. So these are our recommendations and the treatment plan. One of the things, there has to be senior management training. We have a lot of people on the job that don't necessarily know what they're supposed to be doing. They haven't been trained. Just because you have a degree in something, that would be like me trying to go and be a physical doctor, a medical doctor. Yeah, I do have a degree, but I cannot practice medicine. The next thing is department director training. Each department, they need people in that department that is at the head that knows the jobs of what people need to do. Apply and execute strategies based on DOCS, which is what I just showed you. Create an original structure conducive to organizational growth, and that is the STAR model that I'm going to show you at the very end, because that's the one thing that we're going to, that's what we want to move towards. Make changes, but plan carefully and involve senior management as well as the rest of the employees. Play on team strengths and build morale. And so this is our action plan. The first thing that we're going to do on Monday, we're going to meet with senior management and we're going to take DOCS. The next week, second, we're going to meet with all department heads and take DOCS. The third thing we're going to do, we're going to have data talks October 8th through 12th. We're going to meet with the senior management team to discuss survey results, and then we meet with the remaining department heads. November 12th through 16th, action plan, ways to discuss, ways to properly train employees and build morale. We need to come up with a plan of how we're going to, because we can't take all the people off of the job at the same time to get trained. Maybe we can find out, we need to sit down and think of an action plan to get these people trained. November 26th through December 14th, we're going to introduce the STAR model with senior management and department heads to begin the process of revisiting the vision and mission, along with restructuring the organization. And at the very end, this is what we're hoping we're going to get, the STAR structure model, where we have all the people in place that, like Tia said earlier, the people that are in the right places and right on the bus. Go ahead and get the people that are talented, put them in the places where they need to be. Do you have a strategy? Do you have a mission and a goal? Where do you plan on being? Do you have a structure so that people know what their positions are supposed to be, so that it won't be everyone going to Mr. Can or Mr. Cal, or to go to either one of them to say, oh, can I do this? You got to have some kind of structure where people know what they're supposed to be doing and what they can answer to. Processes. How are you going to make decisions? How are you going to get things done? And then rewards. What are you going to do to motivate your people? And that is it for us. Do you have any questions? And
Me. If nobody else has any, I have some.
Okay. We were afraid of that.
All right. So your thesis here is, in a nutshell, that you need to move this company from a family-owned private business to a rational bureaucracy.
Yes, sir.
With clear lines of communications, divisions, organizations, and all of those kinds of things.
Yes, sir.
Everybody understands a rational bureaucracy.
Right.
Which is not, people think of bureaucracy, they think that's a bad thing. No, that's not a bad thing. A rational bureaucracy is what we're striving for here.
Yes, sir.
That's absolutely the answer here, is you do need to move to a rational bureaucracy with lines of responsibilities, do your docs, those things. So yeah, you've hit upon the central issue. Now, you briefly mentioned going to or establishing a board of directors, but you didn't really follow up on that. Thank you for bringing up that screen. You actually took the top one, established a formal organizational structure, which is rational bureaucracy. You have taken that one and run with it. You did not take the establish a board of directors and run with it.
Okay.
Now, actually, that's a good thing. You have these in the correct order. Do not try to establish a board of directors until you have established your rational bureaucracy, your organizational structure. And there's a reason why. If you develop your board of directors under the old family system, basically what happens is everybody picks their friends to be on the board of directors,
right,
which only further solidifies the old organization that you're trying to change from. You can't change with the board of directors that's steeped in the old organizational culture. You change and go to the rational bureaucracy first, then you move to the board of directors and you do board development with them based on the current and new organizational structure of the rational bureaucracy that you have changed to. So that's really the point that I wanted to make this morning. You have the two items here. You have perfectly identified the two things you need to do, but understand you can't do them simultaneously. That's the mistake that most consultants make. We're going to do this and we're going to do this at the same time. We're in a hurry. But if you establish the board of directors initially, you establish it under the old culture, and everybody picks their friends. And then that further impedes your ability to change. So in the change process, understand that you need to establish an organizational shift, culture change first, and then we train the board in that as well once we have established it. But you can't fight on two fronts, because it is going to be a fight. You understand that. It's going to be a fight to change organizational culture. If it was easy, they would have already done it without you. But you can't fight on two fronts. That's the biggest mistake consultants make. They try to fight on two. You got to pick your battles. The battle on this one is establish a formal organizational structure first of the rational bureaucracy. So you have done that. Make sure I've covered everything in my notes now. You mentioned Blockbuster.
yes, sir.
Was not able to change and adapt. I'm not sure they could. Goes back to the buggy whip model. They were making and selling buggy whips, and then there became no longer a need. One of the things that we need to understand, and this is the point I wanted to make, and I'll move on. Not every business should survive. Now they could have pivoted and done something else, but what they were doing was no longer needed. But you have to know where your strength lies. Sometimes it's better to move on gracefully and move into something else. They could have maybe revisioned their company, but there really wasn't any way for that in that iteration of who Blockbuster was. There really wasn't any way for them to survive. And so my point being, as a consultant, if somebody like Blockbuster brought you in and said, "How can we fix our company?" what you would tell them is, "You can't."
Okay.
The goods or services that you're providing are no longer needed. We can pivot your company to something else, but the goods or services, because the market, remember, the market determines your mission. Your vision can be your own, but if nobody pays you for it, then you're in trouble. And so what happened in the Blockbuster case is the client system determined the mission, which was we don't want this anymore. And so that's a whole nother organizational development and shift. If you have a company that's providing something that's no longer relevant in the market, that's a whole nother issue. And so understand that no amount of restructuring, board development, moving to a rational bureau, no amount of that would save Blockbuster. They had a completely different. They had a different problem, and that is that the mission, the client system moved away from them. There was no longer any clients. Now that's kind of one of those number one thing about business is you got to keep the organization alive, but you also have to know when there's no longer a client system, it's not in your best interest in that iteration of the business to try to keep it alive. And so sometimes as a consultant, you just have to be honest with people. There's no longer a demand for this product. We can trying to maximize the company won't work if there's nobody buying what we're selling. And so sometimes you have to be the bearer of bad news in a technology society, especially in technically related things. The technology moves on. And so that's a whole nother set of problems. I just wanted to bring that one up, that it wasn't that somebody could have come in and made their organization more efficient. This company has Yellow Car has a client system. They want their services. They're just not good at delivering them. That's a different organizational problem than Blockbuster, which nobody wanted what they were selling. That's a completely different set. And so the solutions that you brought forward were relevant to a company that has that there is a mission, there is a client system. We just got to get better organization. Their problem was not lack of potential customers. They were out there. And so the doc survey was completely appropriate, and to move to a rational bureaucracy, that is the answer. And so you work on the organization first and the board of directors second. Very good.
Okay.
All right. Let me see. I will go back to participants. I will reclaim host. I'm now the host again. I will go back and share my screen. All right. Who's going to be the host for our second presentation this morning?
But can I access my screen? I can't minimize this or anything.
Keisha, are you going to be the host?
Yes, I said I'll try to be the host, but how can I minimize it so that I can get to my own screen? Like your screen?
Just wait until when I make you the host, you'll have control of your screen. Again. It'll take a second, and it'll ask you to claim the host. Keisha, do you have a control panel box?
Where would it be?
Either the top or the bottom of your screen.
Okay, I see share screen.
There you go.
Stop. But how do I get out to access my own computer? I mean, it's showing me different screens: desktop, whiteboard, iPhone.
Desktop. I'm sorry, desktop. Now you can pick up the screen. There you go.
It's the one titled SN-Case Study 1.
Stop it, Dr. Lamb.
You want me to try to share it with you again real quick?
You can, but I'm sure I haven't, but can share it. Well, those are coming first. We can go over some 504s while we wait if y'all like.
No, thank you.
I just emailed you the link.
Okay.
Again.
You know what? I know exactly why I'm not seeing it, because it's on my Pink Star account, not my school account.
Oh.
That would make sense.
Yay.
I was in the wrong account. I have like 4 Gmails.
Okay.
Set mode. James.
All right. How's everybody doing this morning?
Great, James. Hope you are.
I'm doing all right. Well, as the first group did, they kind of went to the background, so I'm kind of just going to go to the background, not to be redundant. You know, Yellow Auto is a car dealership, a well-known global brand, Renault. Company was established in 1989 in Burgundy, Turkey, by Disney Sale And Denise Hill's sons, Can and Cannarsell, took over management from their father. In 1998, Can and Canner moved the company to Izmir, a larger city in Turkey that had a more demand for automobiles. The company offered three types of services: automobile sales, spare part sales, and after-sale repair service. The company grew to 52 employees to meet growing demand in the region. Kind of just what first.
Okay, when we discussed yellow auto sales, well, the yellow cab company, we felt that the central problem was that the turmoil was faced by yellow auto company was due to their intensive use of transactional leadership methods. The company suffered from significant disadvantages due to this approach, which caused several other secondary problems. The secondary problems that we pointed out and wanted to highlight that we would address are poor organizational climate, the lack of organizational structure and vision, an absence of HR policies and training programs, and they were under the rule of a charismatic, autocratic manager.
Okay, so my alternate solutions included, but not limited to, create a vision and mission of the company, develop written rules and expectations, and communicate them with employees, which is very important because, like one of the employees said, they were rules, but they were all in the head of the manager, which is not good. You have to know your expectations and know what's expected of you. We want to create an organizational chart with clear roles and responsibilities. People have to know what their job is, what their job, how it entails. Create an onboarding process with clear job responsibilities and requirements for personnel. This is very important. You can't just hire people. You have to say, hey, we need this job, we need this position, and this position, here are the requirements for this position. This position should have a master's degree in this, or it should have a bachelor's degree in this, or it should have this type of experience. They need to create that and present it and whatnot. Create and implement training programs for current and future employees. You know, you can't just hire somebody just because they have a degree. You still need further training once you are hired to transition yourself from your degree into the application to applicable, so you can be applicable with your degree. Having a degree is just half the battle. You have to be applicable. Implement more of a transformational style of leadership rather than an autocratic style. Here it's just autocratic. You need more of a transactional to move the company forward.
Okay.
Right, so preferred alternatives. You want to make sure that the organizational structure, roles, and responsibilities are clear and defined. And one way to do that is to utilize the flatter organizational structure model when it comes to updating the organizational chart. With the flatter organizational model, it opens up the lines of communications by dissolving layers within the organization. There's still some hierarchy using this flatter model, but there's also still a strong focus on communication, collaboration, and challenging the status quo. As discussed earlier, definitely want to create mission and vision of the company. Ways to do that is by organizational leaders and managers participating in transformational leadership, professional development, utilizing the MLQ questionnaire, the multi-factor leadership questionnaire, to assess their levels of transformational leadership. Also want to develop written rules and expectations. Doing that by communicating them, by starting with the onboarding process, and making sure that they are included in the employee handbook, and also making sure that these written rules and expectations are available also online as well. And then providing handbook refreshers and updates yearly, so continuing with professional development and providing additional professional development opportunities. Risk to preferred solutions. In creating a new mission, vision, rules, and expectations, some people may not be on board with the new way of doing things. So it leads to those people who may not be on board may not be a good fit for the company, and a decision to replace them may need to be made. In using the flatter organizational structure model, employees will need to commit to enhancing and utilizing better technology. And so if you are stuck in the mode of this is the way that we've always done things, you may be resistant to doing that moving forward. And then lastly, some personnel may be resistant to trainings because they may be resistant to change. This is a risk, but the benefit in this is it helps weed out employees. But as we know, that may also as well.
So our recommendations and implementation plan. First, we want to develop the organizational structure, as Chelsea discussed, and develop the written vision and mission of the company. And of course, we want to include staff members in this process. With leadership in place, ideally, they would be a huge part of the process. But again, if they're not on board, we may need to recommend new leadership in a different way that's not as family owned or family run. Then we would want to help them develop a strategic plan that focuses on the following goals. Leadership development. Ideally, we would want to help the current family leaders be able to lead well. So that would be one of our main goals initially. And then communication improvements. So once the structure is set up, we would want to then implement communication processes or ways that would ensure everyone's in the know as they need to be on changes or things that are occurring across the company. And again, as part of that organizational structure, we need role clarification for all positions. So everyone knows what they're supposed to do as well as what their peers or their supervisors or supervisees are supposed to do, so that everyone's knows their part and we're not running into more or people kind of stepping on each other's toes trying to handle work and knowing who they need to go to. And then training around conflict resolution to ensure that as they develop this new way of working, that they are able to handle any conflicts that come up in an appropriate manner. The strategic planning work session is kind of where we would recommend starting. This could be really a 6 to 9 month process, depending on how detailed the strategic plan would be. But that's where we would help them develop the vision and the mission, and utilize a SWOT analysis, as the other group mentioned, to be able to be a starting point. That would take some time to really be able to dive into the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the organization. And we would want to ensure to include staff and management in this process, that it wouldn't just be the highest level. The goals of the strategic plan, we recommend anywhere from a 2 to 3 year plan, as most strategic plans are. And as part of that, again, the role clarification, which would be the organizational structure with written job descriptions and education of everyone's job. Leadership development as part of that strategic plan could be one of the goals, both for upper management and middle management, needing training and ongoing coaching. Communication, so around the chain of command in general, as well as other avenues of communication to help staff know who to go to when they need answers or solutions. And then training again around conflict resolution could be a long-term goal related to how everyone works together through the process. And as part of the action plan, it's always important to have milestones and a sunset provision. So we would say milestones at least every 6 months. They may need to be more often, but for each goal or strategy, a milestone should be set to be able to review. And then for any strategies that end up being an actual pilot initiative, like something completely new in the way that they're doing things, setting a sunset provision where they will basically say it will end unless it really works well would be important, so that we can ensure that that process is appropriate. And we believe, as we talked through, a SWOT analysis at the beginning is good, but also a reassessment. So once changes are made at maybe the year mark or 2-year mark, completing another SWOT analysis to really review the changes, see how well things are going, including management in that process as well as staff, to really look at, are the strengths still the same? Have the weaknesses changed? Are there any other opportunities or threats that have come about? And for staff input, you can do culture surveys, focus groups, or interviews, or a combination of all of those. And then we would want to ensure that the company has an ongoing assessment process so that when we walk away, they have a good place. They have a good process in place that allows them to continue to assess for future strengths and weaknesses, and keeping them on track to continue to make progress. And that is it.
All right.
Any questions?
Okay.
All right. All right. All right. I have a couple of questions. If nobody
Okay.
else, how much time we got? We got plenty of time. All right. So your thesis is we need to move from a transactional leadership style in this organization to a transformational, basically from an autocracy to a bureaucracy. I get it.
Yeah.
I like the notion of the handbook. Write it down. We're going to write out all of our rules and regulations, structures, those kinds of things. So we're going to work on our organizational structure and our strategic plan as we're going to do those things. All right. So my question is this. Who are we presenting this strategic plan to?
To the sales.
The leadership.
Leadership.
The family.
The family.
Yeah.
The family. We're presenting it to the family. Who's actually in charge in this company?
The one brother.
Yeah.
Okay. So Can and Canner took over the management from their father. So we can assume that he's no longer there. Can we assume that?
That's kind of what I assumed.
Right.
But I guess he could still be an owner, but not there on a daily basis running it.
But as is my point is, as with most family-owned businesses where the father started the business, if they're still, even though they might have turned over the day-to-day to the sons, who is really still in charge here?
The father.
The father. You need to understand who your audience is when you're doing this. Although the idiot sons may be running things and into the ground, the father is obviously still somewhere in the background here. That's the assumption that we have to make. I tell you what this case reminded me of, and why when we picked these, I really like this one. This reminds me of the Carolina Panthers. You know that initially his two sons were to run the team. Richardson's two sons were to run the team initially. One ran the operation side and one ran the team side. Was involved on picking personnel and the draft and all that. The other ran the stadium, concessions, merchandise, and all that. How well did that work out for him? He ended up firing both of his sons because of lawsuits and other issues. And then he turned out not to be a very good person in the end either. But the original iteration of the Carolina Panthers is that he was going to be a silent owner and his sons were going to run things. and he turned it over to them. As we found out later, he never really did. He was always in the background making the decisions. So people thought that his sons were in charge. To the public, it looked like, because they were, one was president of this and one was president of that. And so so it looked like that they were actually in charge of something, except we found out later on through lawsuits over players getting hurt on the field because they'd hired friends and relatives to keep the field up that didn't know anything about a field. And you remember that debacle where the turf came up and a fella broke his leg and some of those kinds of things. What we eventually found out is that the two sons were just, they were not actually in charge. The father was still controlling things. So when you walk into a consultancy situation, especially if it's a family-owned business, you need to find out really who's in charge, who can be a decision maker. You have excellent this group, James, Sarah, Chelsea, Keisha. You have an excellent action plan. But my question is who do we propose this to? Who has the authority to say, yes, that's where we're going? You need to establish that early on. Who is the decision maker or makers? If daddy's still in the background, then is that who we've got to pitch? Know who you are pitching to. We've already talked, as we've already discussed, there is no board of directors here. In a normal organization that's just a rational bureaucracy, we would pitch to the board of directors, but there is no board of directors here. In absence of that, we pitch this strategic plan to leadership. The problem in family-owned businesses, if the patriarch is still alive, that may be him.
Right.
And so we need to know who our audience to pitch our plan to. You have an excellent plan.
But not solely him, right? It would still be him and the rest of the family leaders.
That's correct. But you better, you need to find that out. And you might not do it as directly and as bluntly as I would do it, but you need to find out who writes the checks, who's ultimately in charge, who makes the real decisions here.
Right.
Because I've seen too many, and I've had it to happen to me. When I was on a university team coming in and as a research associate coming in and working on organizational culture and improvement, and they had me come in and said, we want to do some assessments of these programs. And I said, no problem. And the people that I sat with, who I thought were decision makers, all nodding their head up and down. Oh, we love this.
Oh, yeah.
This is wonderful. We're actually going to do some assessment. And it was going to be pretty much, but anytime you do any kind of an assessment, there's personnel implications, folks, in terms of getting the right people, on the bus kind of thing that you just mentioned. When you're going to do an assessment, which, you have to figure out, do I have the right people here that are worth the time, effort, energy, money to train, or have I got the wrong people with the wrong disposition and skills? And so I came in and proposed to this organization what I was going to do in terms of assessment. Everybody there was shaking their head up and down. That was one, but what I later found out fairly quickly is they weren't in decision-making roles. And the decision maker wasn't even in the meeting. They were just going to report back to the decision maker, and the decision maker said, "Oh no, we're not doing that." The decision maker said, "What we were looking for in an assessment was to prove what we were doing is working, because that was a referendum on the leader. You understand? The workers wanted to do a better job. The people in the organization wanted to do a better job for the client system. That's not what the leader wanted done. And so I learned early on in my career in assessment, when you're going in to do an organization, when you're going in to do an assessment and to start an organizational change and improvement, that you better be sure that the person making the decisions is sitting at the table to begin with. This is a perfect example of where that may not be the case in this one. So that's one of those, don't make that mistake. I like the idea, again, be redundant here, handbook, write it down, sketch out your structure, your rules. But again, the person who is in charge has to go along with that. Yeah, we can write out what everybody's role is, but where their role is in the organizational structure, that's dependent upon the leader. Where they want those things, who reports to who, what lines of communication, what lines of authority. That comes back to the person making the decisions. That person needs to be there. And then you can fill in the names after you have the structure. But what happens too many times is we let who's in the role determine where their structure is and where their position is in the organization. You need to be able to develop a rational bureaucracy with lines of communication and reporting and responsibility, absent of the actual people who are going to fill those roles. The biggest mistake that you can make is making those decisions based on the people in the roles, because the people won't always be there, or those people may not have the skills or ability to do that. And so you need to design your organizational structure absent the actual personnel that you have, and then start the Collins process of, do we have the right people on our bus, the bus being the organization that you have now designed with the structure that you want, and then do we have the right people and are they in the right seats? But that structure, that bus, has to come first, absent the people. Too many times we do it backwards. We figure out who we got and we try to figure out what we're going to do with them.
Yeah.
That's a mistake, organizational. From a pure discipline standpoint of organizational culture, analysis, organizational structure, the structure has to come first. Then we'll work on the analysis of what we've got, and then work on our culture and climate issues, which is getting people in the right positions, onboarding them, doing those things. But the structure, the lesson from today, the takeaway, if you don't remember anything else, is the structure has to come first. That's what this organization needs, is a structure. And it's got to come first, absent the personnel. And as you've all pointed out this morning, the children may not be the right people. They don't have, it may not be worth it to try, that they may need to take roles where they, do something else and get this thing working, and they can just share in the profits. They may not be the right people to run these jobs. You may need professionals in the field that have something besides a food engineering degree. So again, organizational, the structure comes first, absent personnel. That's the bus, as Collins calls it. Then you worry about getting the right people on the bus who have the right dispositional skills, and then we worry about getting them on board and training, once we get the right kind of people. That to me is a real key. I showed you this one before. I'll show it to you again. Let me go over here, and it perfectly illustrates the point that I'm trying to make this morning, and my last point of the morning here. There we go. Got to go back to Jasmine. Jasmine's in customer service. If you read all these things about these data points about Jasmine from her subordinates in her customer service, you understand that Jasmine doesn't need to be anywhere near customer service. No, it doesn't make any difference how hard we restructure, how hard we work, as long as we have Jasmine in customer service, we're going to be failing. We're not going to make it as an organization. Now, the question becomes, is there something else in our organization that Jasmine can do? Well, if you will design your structure first, you will know if there's some place you can plug her in. If you start with personnel first, you'll always fail. You'll always fail. Because if you do what you always did, you get what you always got. That goes back again to Argy's double loop theory. Theory of insanity, do the same thing over and over again, expect a different result. Well, that's what happens when you have the same people. You know, my contention is Jasmine doesn't need to be in my organization. That's just me. Now, you may, once you develop the structure in the organization, you may find a place for somebody like Jasmine. But obviously, she doesn't need to be in customer service. And if we used her in the example of the Yellow Auto Company, obviously she couldn't be in sales. She couldn't be in service, but you know, in the service department, she couldn't be in that. And so the only other thing that they had was the parts department. So I don't know if she has the skills to be in the parts department or not. But our issue is we set up our structure. We're not setting it up to try to make Jasmine a job. Right. We're designing, and so Canner and the sister, we're not setting up the organizational structure to try to make them jobs. We set up the structure to make the organization efficient. And once we get the structure set up, we figure out if they've got the dispositional skills that it's worth the time and effort and energy to try to train and onboard them to move their skill set. But, you know, again, I remember my last story of the morning is I was called in as a consultant in a business, and they asked me about, you know, what they could do to improve this particular unit of the organization. And I said, well, what kind of recruitment department have you got set up to recruit new employees? They said, oh no, we want to do this within the employees that we currently have. We just think there just needs to be some tweaking going on. We don't really want to let anybody go. Well, I said, well then it's just not going to go well for you then. And so shortly thereafter, the leader of the organization was non-renewed. The new leader came in, and and basically set up an organizational structure that made held people accountable for outcomes. Was not personnel based, and he became a highly acclaimed. The organization, and he won awards and were very, very successful. Now, I'm not telling you he was a nicer person than the former leader. What I'm telling you is he understood the organization came first, and he designed the organization that way. And if we didn't have the right people, he didn't have a problem with going and getting the right people. Whereas the former organizational leader, we can't let anybody go. We've got to make a change in with what we've got. Well, then you're going to get what you always had. So that's the thing to remember. All right. Questions anybody has this morning?
Dr. Lim, the reflection and everything, is it due tonight or is it due tomorrow night?
It's due by next weekend.
Okay.
You got a few days to work on it if you want to work on it. If you want to just jot your thoughts down now.
Okay.
I kind of jot my thoughts down as I go, but that's just me. Some people like to go back and reflect. Some people watch the tape again. Some people go back and review. As long as you've got it in a reasonable amount of time. It's not due this weekend. You're fine.
Okay.
Whatever your reflective process is. All right. If there's nothing else for the good of the group, I'll sign us out. I will send you the link to this video, and I will post it on, let's see, where will I post it? I guess I'll post it here. I'm in the wrong one here. I'll post it as well. Let me see. Let me make sure I'm know where I'm going to post it so you can find it if you want to. Here, I'll email it to you and I will post it. Let's see, getting the right one here. I'll post it under case study 28, Saturday the 22nd. I'll post it there and I'll email it to you.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
I'll see you.
Have a great weekend.
Everybody have a good weekend. I'll see you in 2 weeks. We'll be back on Zoom again for case number 12. Everybody have a
Okay, thank you. Bye.
bye-bye.
All right, thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.